Hey guys, so today's topic is going to be one of those that's a little bit different from what I usually do. I have two categories, two playlists currently. One of them focusing on current world events and conspiracies, the other focusing on personal growth. This sort of falls somewhere in between these two. So, I'm going to first start off talking about Candace Owens here. And yes, the title of this video, I know it sounds, whoa, the issue I have with Candace Owens, but I just want to be clear right off the bat, guys. I have been a Candace Owens fans for a really long time. My entire family could testify, all of my friends could testify. When I first became awakened to the things of this world and the inconsistencies and all the lies that we were told, I didn't really have a sense of guidance of where to go. I just knew I was hungry for information. I knew that I wanted to make sense of the world around me and do it in a way that is as accurate as I possibly could. And my intentions were all there. But what I ended up doing is just going online and researching about a bunch of things, falling down rabbit holes, I needed a sense of direction. And that's when I ran into Candace Owens. And I'd seen her before. Like, I remember seeing videos of her when she was pregnant, and I believe she was at Turning Point USA, and she'd be having talks at college campuses. And, I just remember looking at her and be like, dang, that's a very well-spoken woman, very well articulated. And I liked a lot of her perspectives because, truth be told, I don't have any political affiliation. Sometimes I lean a little liberal, sometimes I lean conservative. Well, I am a Christian, so at times I do tend to lean conservative. But I really liked a lot of her opinions. And I remember thinking, man, one day I would like to get to that point where I can be as well spoken as she is and as fearless to not feel like you need to withhold your opinions when you think that or that it could make the world a better place. And so I just want to make sure that that's clear, that this video, the intention is not to bash or misrepresent Candace Owens or to say don't watch her, because guys, in all reality, I still watch some of her videos. I don't watch all of them as much as I used to, but I just want to make sure that I throw my support out there, because out of all the podcasters that exist out there, I'm still very much appreciative of Candace Owens. When I started following her podcast, she gave me a sense of direction. She talked about a lot of things. She talked about the disappearing airplane. She talked about what happened with the USS Liberty. She talked about all of these really amazing topics and conspiracies that happened. And it was in a way that where she interviewed someone, and I saw it to be as unbiased as someone could get with those topics when she was interviewing those people. And so my heart will always feel appreciative for the direction that Candace Owens gave me. That being said, I do want to talk a little bit about kind of what I've been noticing and just things to look out for. You guys have to understand that these people exist while they speak in a way that reaches out a huge amount of the public. They exist in a different world than we do. Candace Owens, she did grow up, to what she said is that she grew up more low income. She lived in, I believe she mentioned she lived in a home that was cockroach infested, and she eventually ended up moving with her grandparents. There was a whole thing. So I know her heart spoke earnestly when she spoke about those things, and I believe that especially when she started her career, her heart really was for the Black community, and she really has good intentions for that. So that much is true, is that she could relate to people in that way. However, that's not her life anymore. Truth be told, guys, and I'm only keeping it straight up here, she's a millionaire now. I don't know exactly what her net worth was. I sort of wrote it down. It was something like 4 or 5 million, around there. And then her husband, who, by the way, I have to throw this out there, George Farmer, he has some of my favorite quotes in the very few podcasts that he's done. I think he's a phenomenal human being. I'm not going to bash on him. But his net worth is somewhere between 180 to 240 million. Now, I'm not saying this because I'm bashing on people who have a lot of money. It's just because, as modest as you can possibly get, especially him being a Christian, you still exist in a different world. When you have money and when you have influence and when you know a lot of people, you see a vast number of information that you would have never been exposed to had you not been in that position. Guys, for those of you who are waking up to what the world is like, you guys see how much information is out there. And if you really are a humble person going into this with the right intentions, you kind of go through a curve where you're like, man, I know so much because I've been reading a lot. And then it dips and you're like, wow, I absolutely know nothing. And then it goes all the way up again and you're like, wow, I know so much. I'm getting the hang of it. And then you're like, there's so much information out there. Boom, you plummet again. Like, I know nothing. If we have the access to all this plethora of information, could all the more them who have been, I mean, think about it, guys. Like, Candace Owens was in Turning Point USA. She met a lot of people. She met a lot of politicians. She met people who have access to either higher positions or whatever it might be. She has access to other journalists. Not everything she knows of the world she's going to post. So what I'm saying is, here are our lens, hers, or even bigger lens, because she has a pretty big understanding of the world. That is not to say that she has the perfect understanding of the world. It's her own perspective of it. But what I'm saying, guys, is that like they sort of exist in a different world than we do. So the reason why I mention this right away is because a lot of us are very quick to like fight and defend people with all our hearts when one, we've never met these people in our lives, and two, we don't really know the full picture of what's actually happening in the backgrounds. Now, why am I mentioning this? Because while I love Candace and I truly believe and I see the change in her old videos where she used to like go off and like be really angry and like lose her temper very, very quickly back when she first started off with her debates and all that stuff. But then now she's a lot calmer. She doesn't really lose her patience as much as far as like when debates happen. And not only that, like I see that she converted to Catholicism and she truly is trying to become a better person. And I also say this because recently when Charlie Kirk got shot and I saw the stuff she was saying online where I remember she commented on quite a few people's posts and she was swearing, and she's someone who doesn't believe in swearing. One of those people was Nick Fuentes. And I remember seeing her comment on his Twitter page. It was like he was talking about how him and the Groypers were being accused of having been involved with the shooting of Charlie Kirk. And then Candace Owens commented on there, which he was not talking to Candace at all. And she commented on underneath his comment, like, shut the F up. Like, you're grifting off of Charlie's death and everything is about you. Charlie dies and you're the victim. And like, I understand she's grieving and I never blamed her for that. However, one of the things I feel like it needs to be pointed out is that not long after she posted, hey guys, like I went to talk to a priest and it's wrong of me to speak that way. So I do see that she's making changes. I'm not trying to hate on her in that way. However, while she is converting to Catholicism, one of my issues that I sort of ran into with Candace is when I first started watching her, she had just left the Daily Wire, had been just under a year when they had fired her from the Daily Wire. And if you guys don't know her story, she used to work for this right-winged news outlet. I guess you can call that. It was the Daily Wire. And that was really one of the highlights of her career. And she fit in really well. She did an amazing job. But then Israel and Gaza went into war. And then she saw what was happening to the people of Gaza, how they were being blown up. And like, she saw the pain of a mother. And so she started speaking out about it. And because she spoke against Israel, they had fired her. And I can't even imagine what she went through. And towards the end, I'll talk a little bit more about that because I had a smaller but more similar experience. So I understand the level of PTSD she must have went through with that. But like when she initially left the Daily Wire, she started her own podcast. And I remember watching her when she was only at just a little bit above 1 million views. And I loved it. I thought she was so awesome because I was like, that's a boss woman right there. She got a voice, whatever. And like all the amount of people that she was interviewing really felt like she was trying to help everyone get educated. And then her followers started getting bigger and bigger. And she reached 2 million and then 3 million. And then I sort of started to see a little bit of a shift in Candace. And guys, I want you to know this podcast is literally just me explaining my experience, and I wonder if any of you guys are going through the same thing because like I don't really know what to make of it. But then issues started to arise because, as you know, when you gain influence, that sort of scares people. And so a lot, and I still don't fully know because I'm not in those societies, but like her being up there and slowly gaining influence came with conflict. So she had started having conflicts with a few people, and like I'm just going to throw this out there. I vividly remember Candace Owens talking about Taylor Swift and mentioning how Taylor Swift, she used to bump her music and still does. And she spoke well of Taylor, but then she also said during the whole Blake Lively and Justin Baldoni case that was going on, she said Taylor Swift is not innocent in all this. And I believe her, truly. Because Taylor Swift is a billionaire. there's no way you could have reached that point unless you have a little bit of a, devilish side to you. You kind of have to survive in that industry. And so she was mentioning about how Taylor, her Swifties, about how scary they are sometimes, and how Taylor just simply has to say a sob story, and all of the Swifties go and they murder these people with their words, and they go and attack in Taylor's behalf. Taylor just has to say, so and so said this about me, and all the Swifties come like a marching army, and they basically destroy these people. So she was making comments about that. She's so right. Like, Taylor Swift does do that, and it's scary. But then, guys, I don't know if you remember, and you may not know this about Candace, but like, I was a thorough follower of her. I watched all her videos every single week. I watched the ones before that I missed. Like, I even had a subscription to her book club because I'm a big book reader. Like, I was 100% supportive of Candace. And then House and Habit happened. So in case you don't know, House and Habit was basically an influencer online, had an Instagram. I looked her up online. I don't know if she still has that Instagram, but she didn't like Candace at first, early on in her career. And then she said she liked Candace, and her name is Jessica Krause. And so she was mentioning, you know what, guys, like, I actually, later on, she said, I do agree with Candace. She makes a lot of really valid points. And then she said she envied her freedom. She even made a collage of Candace. But then as Candace started gaining more following, Candace wasn't just covering politics and like conspiracy. She started covering Blake Lively and Justin Baldoni, because Candace likes reading a lot of those court cases. She just loves reading lawsuits. So yeah, so when she started covering Blake Lively and Justin Baldoni cases, immediately Jessica Krause was like accusing her of like she's changing her brand. Like she was all politics and conspiracies. Now, all of a sudden, she's about Hollywood. But like, the only reason I'm bringing this up, guys, because if you weren't there for that drama, you ought to look up Candace Owens' beef with House and Habit, or the drama between House and Habit and Candace Owens. And that is actually, if you want to look that up, you can look up the Candace Owens podcast, episode 166. She explains it all right there. And so what ended up happening is that this lady, Jessica Krause from House and Habit, started accusing Candace Owens of things like, you changed your brand, da-da-da-da-da. Candace was like, what are you talking about? And right away, Jessica Krause was saying, like, Candace has secret wealth that she's hiding from everyone. And she started saying a bunch of things that Candace was like, that's not true. Where am I going to hide all this wealth? Here's the thing, though, guys. At this point, she's like 3 million views. And this is where I'm not joking. Like, I don't think Candace will ever see this, but Candace, if you ever see this, like, this is probably the first time I felt a little bit uncomfortable with something that you did. You accused Taylor Swift of having been, like, a mean girl for sending her Swifties on people by saying, like, what people were doing to her. But you did the same thing with House and Habit. And it was justified. Don't get me wrong. Like, House and Habit was spreading lies about you. But what did you do? You went and you told everyone exactly what House and Habit was doing. You send the messages, you screenshotted them on Instagram, all of them with like laughing faces. And like, Candace, like, that's mean girl behavior to like post all of it. And then you have a huge following, way more than House and Habit did. And you know exactly what happened. Like, everybody who followed this drama knows what happened. All of the, now what we call Candace followers, or Standesses, right? All of Candace Owens' followers bombarded House and Habit and like destroyed her with their words. And like, I remember seeing all the comments. They went on all of her videos, all of her pictures of Jessica Krause, and they just destroyed her in the comments. She had to disable all the comments. They were sending her hate comments through private messages. And like, I don't know if that's what led to her canceling her Instagram. Like, I don't know fully with that. But like, even though it was justified, you did the same thing as Taylor Swift. Taylor Swift knows she has so many followers. She has to just say, if someone hates on her, hey, so-and-so's hating on me, and the Swifties will go and destroy them. You did the same thing. And I remember in that moment, like, I was like, I really not just looked up to you. I still look up to you and I still respect you. But like, I remember thinking like, Candace, you have a large following, and like, this is what you used it for? Like, you don't want to tear people down with your followings. And maybe I don't know, because I don't have a large following. I mean, I'm just starting my podcast, but I really didn't like that, because it really like, and I remember when I first heard about the House and Habit thing, I remember thinking, you know what? Like, who is this person who's speaking to Candace like that? And I paused, and I was like, when I read all the comments on her Instagram, they were mean. Like, Candace Owens' followers were mean to her. And like, I get it. but I don't, because like as a Christian, I thought, well, we shouldn't be speaking to people like this, even if they are acting a certain way. And I know that they did go after Candace's family a little bit with their words, but like, and it's why, like, I don't blame Candace for going on there and threatening them with her words, but like the whole getting your followers to do it. I mean, you have to know that we love you, Candace. Like, and like we want to stand up for what you stand up for. So if you start saying these people are attacking me, these people are attacking me, this is what they're doing, they're spreading their lies, you have to know your followers are going to go and like defend you, right? That's what happens when you have charisma. People follow you, people defend you. And so I guess I just didn't appreciate that. So that was just the first time. Another time when that happened with Candace was, and I'll put the video above because I need to go look for it. There was another time when Candace, because she would post every day before her maternity leave. For now, I think she posts most of the days, Monday through Thursday. But I remember before she went on maternity leave, there was one time when she got on her podcast, and it'll like say the title says like, I don't know, Jeffrey Epstein this, or like Blake Lively that, and everyone's clicking on it thinking you're gonna watch a Blake Lively video. But then she goes on a tangent about how there, when she woke up, there was a Jewish journalist. I don't remember if she was like a journalist or some kind of influencer that was starting to spread lies about Candace. And that part, I understand the frustration. But then Candace went on a whole tangent for a little while talking about, of course, she's doing it because of this, she's doing it because of that. And she even screenshotted and posted her Instagram. And like, I sort of knew immediately what was going to happen. So like I went on that person's Instagram and I checked the comments, and again, all the Candace followers, like all the Candace followers were on the comments. They were like, "You don't mess with her. We don't play around with her. You effing whatever." And it was like low key, like, okay, I'm not trying to be this way, but like some people are anti-Semitic. Some people hate Jews. So when you happen to mention she's a Jewish reporter, a Jewish journalist, like you have to know that on top of that, speaking negatively, even though those people sort of deserve it, it's going to cause a negative influence on someone's brain, whether that be conscious or unconsciously. That's how it works. You know, as a science teacher, I'm going to explain to you, like, just because you know something is wrong, but you constantly hear it over and over and over and over again, like, it does something to you subconsciously. Like, it's sort of like psychology is weird. It still sort of has an influence on you. So, like, while I understand Candace has the total right to freedom of speech and she can speak about whatever she wants, you have to be very careful how you word things. And I know she does her videos live, so they're unedited, so I understand that part. But by mentioning every single little detail and how it affected you and then posting their Instagram, like, you're doing the same thing as Taylor Swift does. You have a large following and it's a really big responsibility. And like I will say in Candace's defense with this, she was targeted, she was attacked after having spent her whole young adulthood, going around for 2 years with Charlie Kirk and Turning Point USA. She was very supportive of the right of, conservatives, and me being like a young sort of conservative, that like I really appreciated that. And like she dedicated her whole life to that. And then on top of that, she went to the Daily Wire and her heart was all in that too. And then she was targeted and attacked. She was labeled anti-Semite of the year. And like, dang, like I cannot imagine that happening. Like that's gotta be like to some level traumatizing to fully learn how to get over that happening. So like a lot of hate was directed towards her. And then, so like I get it. And I will say this, guys, in a more minor level. So I recently got on TikTok. I just didn't like TikTok. It's not like I just have my own issues with it. So me, because I just started this podcast, one of my friends kept telling me, get on TikTok, put your short clips on there. So then I did. I just did it this last month. And for the first time ever, one of my videos, I got 1,000 views. There was like, I woke up in the morning the next day and there was like 42 people that were fighting in my comment section. And it was like they missed the complete, like, guys, this is my first time going through this, where I made a video about Pam Bondi in the comment that she made about the difference between hate speech and free speech, and how that's a really like gray area. You got to be careful about saying you're going to handcuff people and that you're going to create laws against hate speech, because like who decides what hate speech is? That's what my video was about. And so like this was my first time ever where I received so many hate comments, because only for like maybe 15 seconds of the video I talked about Jimmy Kimmel. I was not saying Trump did cancel Jimmy Kimmel's show. I did not say Pam Bondi canceled Jimmy Kimmel's show. But what I happen to mention is, hey, like Jimmy Kimmel said a lot of really messed up things. Like he gets canceled over this. So that was just confusing to me. I never said that an employer didn't have a right to cancel their employee. They are well within their rights to do that. But this was my first time in my 2-minute video about Pam Bondi that all the comments focused on one thing that I said, and it was completely out of context. I remember reading all the stuff they were accusing. They were accusing me of being a liberal, and I'm like, you guys know me. Like, I can't think liberal sometimes, but like, I don't have a political affiliation, and if anything, I lean a little bit more conservative. So I was like, why am I being accused of things that aren't true? And then all of a sudden, it hit me in a more minor level, right? I was like, dude, I can't imagine Candace Owens like having been targeted and attacked and like, fired from the Daily Wire and having her own podcast. And then if you go on X, the amount of bots that are spreading so many lies about her, like this is where I'm mentioning, guys, like you have to be careful who you listen to, because like to some level, even if Candace say she went through therapy, say she spoke to priests, like to some level, she's gonna have some type of paranoia or like PTSD from having been got. She went through smear campaigns. People were lying about her, and like she's in the bigger leagues here. Like she has she's 5 million subscribers to her YouTube channel, and like her website constantly gets sold out of merch. And then she has a very successful book club. She has very successful subscription membership, and like she constantly, in a grander scale, gets hate online. So to some degree, imagine this. When you are more humble and you don't have as large of a following, you can easily say, you know what, guys, based on the comments, maybe it was a little messed up of me to say this. I will make sure I say it better next time. This is really what I meant. But being in the bigger leagues like Candace, it's like either you double down or you apologize. And I feel like rarely does Candace apologize. And I'm not saying she's right or wrong for this, because I feel for her. Like, how do you know when you made a mistake or when people are just trying to smear you, when constantly every day it's a fight of people trying to smear you? So like what I'm saying is Candace may not be doing this intentionally, but if you only solely rely on Candace Owens to get your news, you might accidentally be influenced by her PTSD and insecurities and projections that she may have because she was fired from the Daily Wire, because she survived a smear campaign where she was labeled anti-Semite of the year. So like to some degree, even if Candace does go through all this, like speaking to a priest and all that, like she's gonna have to wonder, should I double down and stand on my opinion, or should I apologize? And sometimes when she should be apologizing, she's not gonna apologize. And like, guys, I love her to pieces and I will always respect her, but like that may have an influence on your mind. If your way of getting news is solely watching Candace Owens' show, you're going to be heavily influenced. And you're gonna have a very narrow lens of looking at things, even though I think she's a phenomenal journalist. So what I'm saying is, guys, if you're going to get news from somewhere, don't just listen to Candace Owens. Also listen to other things. Maybe you might want to listen to, I don't know, Tucker Carlson, or maybe you may want to listen to any podcast. Some people like Tim Dillon because he has a comedic way of doing it. It's like really funny. Some of you like listening to, I may not necessarily be a huge follower, but some people like Nick Fuentes. Some people like, you know, whoever the podcasters is. Some people like Joe Rogan Experience, and some people just like to cross-reference different news outlets, which I know a lot of us have issues with that because the news has lied to us so many different times. But what I'm saying is, guys, if you want to know my honest opinion on the best way to get your information, you do your own research. You do your own research, finding out what's happening in the world, cross-referencing different videos, different perspectives from other countries, and like get your own opinion. And then you can go and listen to podcasters. But realistically, I understand some of us work a lot. Some of us are parents. Some of us are like, you have things that are going on that keep you busy that you can't always research it. But I highly encourage you guys, don't just listen to Candace Owens. Like, I love her to pieces, but she could be heavily influencing you in a way and giving you a sort of PTSD and anxiety that may not necessarily be there, right? And so, yeah, so I just kind of wanted to talk about that too, because like another thing about Candace, I watch Candace's videos to this day, and I will still be as supportive of her because I'm always going to be grateful for the role she played in my life. But her going through what she went through, and like, though she was low income before, she no longer is. All of these overlap with each other, and like, while Candace Owens does a pretty decent job at like providing evidence for things, like, She's just one perspective. One of the issues I was running into when me being a big Candace follower is that she would talk, say, about RF Kennedy Jr., or she would talk about JD Vance, or she'd talk about Trump, or she'd talk about Biden, or she'd even just talk about, say, House and Habit, the person she had beef with. And because we love Candace, we tend to take her word for it. How many of us actually watching Candace Owens go and try to research the opposite side? Okay, what is House and Habit saying about Candace? Or like, what, aside from what Candace is telling you, what is JD Vance saying about this versus what she's telling you? What I'm saying is like, if you're only going to listen to Candace, like, you are only like, you're only going to get one side of the story. There's two sides of the same coin, so there's always more than one side of the story. While Candace may be 90% right, there could be a 10% we're missing. So you have to fact check it. And yeah. So another thing, because I sort of made a list over here. No one is ever all right all the time. And so this is the dichotomy of life. And this is sort of what I wanted to get at here. To every good comes a bad. And no one's ever going to be satisfied. So I recently realized this, especially me being someone who's heavily into the podcasting, listening to a lot of podcasts. I could say I'm pro life and saying we should maybe ban abortion, like make it like a federal thing. Like I could easily say that. And all of the religious people, all of the conservatives are going to say, woohoo, we don't have that. But now you have these people who believe in pro-choice, who immediately will uprise, who immediately may even cause violence. You never know, right? Well, that's because, like I said, the dichotomy of life is understanding that with every good, there's going to be a bad. Why am I saying this? Because sometimes we get very stuck in our ways. So I noticed that I was only listening to conservative podcasters for a little while. And so some of them were really good. Don't get me wrong. Here are a few of them. I have them right here on my Spotify. One of them, of course, you guys know, was Candace Owens. Another one was Tucker Carlson. And I'm going to talk about Tucker Carlson in a second. I don't want my video to get too long here. But a few other podcasters I'd listen to. I believe it's, the Sean Ryan podcast as well. I would listen to Joe Rogan. I would listen to Tim Dillon, only because Tim Dillon's really funny to me. And a bunch of other ones that I'll just leave out because you guys get the idea. And then I realized, you know what? Like, just because I agree with these people doesn't necessarily mean that this is for the good of overall mankind. A great leader understands of trying to meet the world where it is, not trying to change the world based on what you think it should be. And let me rephrase that because I feel like that wasn't emphasized well enough. We constantly are unhappy with life because we keep thinking it should be this way, it should be this way. We first must meet the world where it is. And so we need to think of the good of overall mankind. And I can't say I know the answer to everything or how exactly to get there. But what I'm saying is that when you only listen to one type of conservative outlet or just liberal outlet, is that you get very caught up in the algorithm. And this works the same way with TikTok. This works the same way with Instagram. You have to be very careful because if all you listen to are liberal influencers, all you listen to are conservative influencers, the algorithm is going to continue to feed you back those exact same kind of content. And you're never going to see the other side. If you cannot understand the dichotomy of life, of understanding that there's two sides of the same coin, that there's two stories to everything, that while you say, I think pro-choice is great, or I think pro-abortion or pro-life is a good thing, you lose your empathy to be able to see the pain it's going to cause on the other side. And we have to be able to accurately weigh that within a scale of like, what would be the good for mankind now, work with it where it is now, and then slowly cause a change over time. Because instead, what it ends up causing when we become a little bit too radical and trying to shove something down where our world is not currently at, it causes more division amongst ourselves. And we don't need that, guys. We don't need more division sown. And like, I really hate it how like me being like a little slightly more conservative, I've seen this, guys, where like the way people who only read Fox News, only watch Fox News, only watch conservative podcasts, is that we say, oh, the crazy liberal left or the woke left, or on the reverse end, the woke right. And it's like, guys, we don't need that. If we were to just open up our minds and listen to what the other side has to say, that's literally what Charlie Cook stood for, guys. Charlie Kirk was saying, I believe this way. Here's why I think it should be. And you talk to me about your perspective. Explain to me why you think that it should be this way. And I even saw him one time where a guy was talking about being vegan and the importance of being of how your health can improve being vegan. And Charlie Kirk had his all his points in line about why you should eat meat and the deficiencies you can go through. And this guy scored Charlie Kirk. I'll see if I can find the video and post a picture or the link below in the description below my YouTube channel. And Charlie said, "You know what?" He's like, "Thank you. Like, I appreciate your perspective. I'll take more of a look on that." And I was literally like, yo, so the thing about Charlie isn't that he was all closed-minded, is that you had to present an intellectual enough argument. Otherwise, he wasn't going to see it as valid. And I'm the same way with that. Is I'm like, and this is another thing, is like, I feel like when it comes to intellectuals, is that like you have to be able to present an argument that is logical, that is consistent, that makes sense, because why are we going to follow an argument that doesn't have any evidence or is all based on emotion? It has to be something that you feel like you can apply to your life and it's going to be beneficial and it makes sense. Something, because like, here's another thing I feel like people don't understand is that like we get so angry at each other for not agreeing with each other that we don't understand that like we may not always be right about things. This is what I mean. Understanding the dichotomy of life is that like while we think we're all right, if we can slightly open up our minds to other things, we may get a clearer picture as to what our world currently needs now. And so that's the issue I was running into, is that when I only listen to Candace Owens, it's like it was me against the woke left. It was me against those who were hardcore Zionists and pro-Israel. And I was literally like, yo, what if she's not fully right about that, right? And so that's when I started looking into other outlets that I was like, you know what? Like, I'm heavily being influenced, and maybe I need to look into, could she potentially be wrong about this? Though I will say, when it comes to like, say, the Epstein files or like the Brigitte Macron series or the Kamala series or any of these things, like, I think she's a phenomenal journalist. If I need any information when it comes to reading court documents and analyzing things that like are pretty inconsistent, that don't have to deal with the PTSD that she's been through, like, I always watch those videos. I'm always going to say she's an amazing journalist. Now, moving on, you do have to do your own research, guys. And even the best of us tend to project our fears onto people, and we could be wrong. And with every podcaster you listen to, you need to have that understanding. And this is, and to elaborate on this point, I really don't appreciate people saying, be careful what you put out there because it's forever going to be there. And I understand it's the truth. But then you have someone like Tucker Carlson, who was constantly talking about, supporting the Iraq war, and later on came out and said, guys, you know what? I was wrong about that. Like, I was heavily influenced, or him being angry at people who believed in that 9/11 was a conspiracy. And he used to like walk out on people saying, I cannot believe you're even doing this. How inconsiderate. And he changed his mind. He was like, you know what? There are a lot of questions that were unanswered that don't make any logical sense when it comes to 9/11. And then people are like, look, he's fake. He swings one way, then he swings the other. He can't make up his mind. And it's like, guys, another thing, if you're going to listen to influencers, you have to understand that sometimes they're going to be wrong. But the key thing is this, guys, can they admit when they are wrong? And this sort of goes into another thing. Like, I love Candace and I understand her anxieties, but sometimes she doesn't know how to admit when she's wrong. Which is why I was so proud of her when she posted online, like, hey guys, I spoke to a priest and it's not right. Like, I am hurting about Charlie Kirk's death, but like, I shouldn't be talking to people like this. That's why I was like, oh my gosh, Candace apologized. Like, she's getting better, which made me happy. I do really care about her. Now, the next part is going to be my advice on how you know and be careful about people who are influencers, because I'll see if I could post the link of a few podcasters who have provided receipts and evidence that some people are being paid. They're fake influencers, or they're strong influencers who get paid quite a bit of money, and they lie about people. They do smear campaigns because they're being paid. And so what I mean by that, and even a step farther, is there have been influencers who have been exposed for being CIA assets or who are Mossad connected in some kind of way. And you have to understand that, like, sometimes there's always, to everything in life, especially when it comes to the media, there's always more at play. And so while you may think that certain ideas or trends, like, say, I don't know, people's idea that Israel is like controlling the entire US, like, don't get me wrong, there are valid arguments with like some of the stuff that people say. But you have to understand that there's bigger powers at play. Who started that movement? Was it really these influencers? Maybe you might say, yeah, look at the conflict that happened to them. It obviously was from these people, right? Okay. Well, who caused the conflict that caused the conflict upon those influencers? What do I mean by this? Is that there's always the people who you see are speaking and having issues with other people. Those are not the ones who are fully behind everything. The people who are truly behind everything, who are puppeteering a lot of these politicians, are elites whom we don't know their names. Some of them we might know their names, but we don't know their names. So like you can't help but wonder who starts trends, who starts the beliefs. Like people didn't really hate on Israel as much until Gaza and Israel got into a war and Hamas started, the terrorist organization started doing crazy things, right? And so like what I'm saying is whoever controls the media controls the narrative that the people believe. And so be very careful because like podcasters are no exception to this, guys. Some podcasters may be heavily influenced and not know it and then be sharing that information to you. Some of them could be intelligence assets who are trying to influence the media to think a very specific way. Some of them may belong to a secret society that they have a narrative they need to push in order to be one step closer to whatever their goals are. You never know why these people were allowed to have millions of followers, or sometimes even as close to nearly 1 billion followers. They were allowed to be there because, again, the media is so important that you really don't think that at that level, like say the Joe Rogan level or the Ben Shapiro level or the Tucker Carlson level, these people, they have, like I said before, guys, lenses are this small. Their lenses are here. They have a wide understanding of the world. And they're going to react based on what they think the direction that humanity should go. So you have to guard your minds at all costs that everything you hear from podcasters should be something not to be taken as fact, but something to take into consideration and should be taken back to your own research. Especially if you hear something like, oh my gosh, like, I don't know, I'm making something up. China is doing this, and that. China is trafficking their own people. And you're like, oh my gosh, China's trafficking their own people. Then you're like, okay, I'm going to start telling people China's trafficking their own people. You can't do that, guys. Just because a podcaster said so, you have to take that information, go online at some point, and do your own research to find out if it's true. And now you might say, yeah, but I don't have the time for it. Then don't share it with people unless you've verified it, because you could very well be accidentally spreading a lie. And it's like, that's what we have to be careful is that while I love this podcast era, I love this influencer era where we can speak our opinions, we have to be very careful because if we continue to spread the information we hear without verifying it, we could be inadvertently creating a movement that is being puppeteered by elites or secret societies that want people to have this particular belief. And we could be very wrong to it. Again, the dichotomy of life is like, in everything you do, it's understanding that like, while you're fighting for a greater good, there's always going to be some kind of negative outcome that comes out of it. And you have to weigh how much that negative outcome is going to be worth what you have to say. So like with podcasters, it's very fine line, and it's even harder for them because how do they know when to double down or when to apologize when they've been wrong about something? Like I really feel for our influencers on that one. Lastly, guys, I just wanted to share a few verses. Say you're like, you know what, but like, how do I know if I'm being deceived? How do I know if this person has like some kind of ulterior motive? Or like if they're being influenced by some kind of foreign intelligence, or maybe even they're being paid to lie. First and foremost, guys, everyone has biases. Absolutely everyone has biases. So every podcaster you're listening to is going to have their own thing that they're projecting onto their audience. That's the whole point of being an influencer. You're trying to influence someone into believing something that you believe to be true. But we should always challenge your thoughts. I think that if you are heavy into politics or you're heavy into listening to podcasters, you at least, I would say once a week minimum, you have to sit down and say, what's something I've heard recently that really affected me, or I think really sparked something or ignited something within me, whether it be rage, whether it be like fear, anxiety. You have to take time to really think about it and say, why did this cause fear among me? Why did this cause anxiety or rage? And then did I do my research to verify if this is true? Because sometimes we tend to psych ourselves out, or we tend to overthink things because we don't take the time to really stop and think about it. And we don't want to inadvertently cause rage amongst ourselves. We could accidentally be prejudiced and not even know it because of all the stuff we've been exposing our minds to. How do you find wisdom? You guys know that this is a Christian podcast, so I'm going to tell you right now. James 1:5 says, if any of you lacks wisdom, let him ask God, who gives generously to all without reproach, and it will be given to him. If you sit down and you pray and say, God, and I feel this way now, guys, like with Charlie Kirk passing away, with the Epstein files, like voting happening right when Charlie Kirk happened, and then they're not going to be released, and like, my heart is broken for our world. And every time I log into X or every time I log into social media, it feels like our entire world is divided and it's a mess, right? So, and then it feels like Candace Owens is being accused of all of this stuff. And then Ian Carroll's being accused of all this stuff. And then Tucker Carlson is supposedly Qatar. And then Laura Loomer is like a Mossad agent. And then they're all going up against each other. And it's like, who could I listen to? Is anybody else going through that? Where you're like, how do I know who's right or who's wrong? For the most part, I'm going to tell you guys, my thing is that I pray. And another thing I'm going to mention, guys, you shall know them by their fruits. And I will elaborate on more on that in a moment. You go to God in supplication and prayer, and he will give you the wisdom and the spiritual discernment to know when something is the truth and when something is a fabricated lie. I mean that, guys. I feel like because our world has really strayed away from God and they see spirituality as being something as a negative, it's really disconnected us to our spiritual instincts. And with spiritual instincts comes our awakening to be able to tell when we're being deceived. And so, yeah, I'm going to tell you now, like James 1:5, it says, if you lack wisdom, ask God in prayer. Matthew 10:16 says, we should be as wise as serpents and harmless as doves. What does that mean? That means that when we go online and we decide to do research and say, this is really crazy, I need to tell the world about it, or I need to tell my family members, or I need to tell my friends, even if you don't become an influencer, but you want to tell people around you about it, we need to be really, really wise in the way we go about it. And, asking the Lord for the wisdom, going in and doing our research properly. But we should also do it in a way that is harmless as a dove, meaning understanding that we're working with humans, very flawed humans, broken humans that can do evil things. Or, I can't help but think of Charlie Kirk's wife today in the memorial, where she said to the boy who shot to the young man who shot my husband, she said, I forgive you. That is Christ in someone. That is being led by the Holy Spirit. And so when we speak of the Epstein files and we say, well, F Trump because he hasn't released them, or like Biden should have done it, that kook, or like Kamala this or whatever, we're like, guys, be wise as serpents, but harmless as doves. Because when we represent the character of Christ with sharpened wisdom, that is when people will be able to judge us by our fruits. Because what we have to share is not hateful. It's not being directed to hate people who are LGBTQ, or hate people who are Christians, or hate people who are Jewish. It's strictly to educate people and to be as harmless and loving and understanding that we are flawed humans and we tend to do things that aren't okay sometimes. The next one, Matthew 7:15 through 20, which says, Matthew 7:15 through 20 says, beware of those who come in as wolves in sheep's clothing. You will know them by their fruits. Do men gather grapes from thorn bushes or figs from thistles? And even so, every good tree bears good fruit, but a bad tree bears bad fruit. And a good tree cannot bear bad fruit, nor can a bad tree bear good fruit. Every tree that does not bear good fruit is cut down and thrown into the fire. Therefore, by their fruits you shall know them. If you're wondering, how do I know if this influencer or this podcaster is someone I should be listening to? Judge them by their fruits. When they speak Christ, do they show it in their actions? And especially, how do they behave towards the people who are their enemies or the people who are against them? One of the best examples I could think of recently was the way that Erica Kirk handled everything. Her, of all people, she had all the right to be hateful, to be angry. It was warranted. It was justified. Her husband was taken from her. Like, I literally cannot imagine. Like, it's hard out here, man. like, in the dating world. And then I can't imagine having found the love of her life, the father of her children, and living a very, very happy life. And someone took that from her. And what did she say? She quoted the scripture saying, Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do. She said, to the young man who shot my husband, I forgive you. That is showing good fruits. That's someone you should listen to. And so what I'm saying is, obviously we're dealing with flawed human beings. But if there's ever a time, because that a podcaster, whether it be Candace Owens or whether it be anyone, Joe Rogan, where they're trying to tell you something, but then their fruits don't reflect the character of Christ, as Christians, we should take that information with a grain of salt. And that's just what I have to say, because if what I'm seeing is someone who's crying, Lord, Lord, but then they're being hateful, they're being spiteful, they're doing, and I'm not saying Candace was doing that. I'm saying, like, this is just a rule of thumb for listening to any influencer, podcaster in general. And, that has nothing against, and by the way, everything I'm sharing has nothing to do with Candace's investigative journalism. I think she's a phenomenal journalist, and she's done phenomenal investigations. I watched the majority of her series. And so, yeah, if it's ever information based, where it's like reading court cases, I will always recommend to read Candace's information. I mean, her podcast that she has. And one of the things, and lastly, I'll wrap this up by saying, one of the things I always appreciate about Candace Owens and why you can't really hate on her too much is because half of y'all haters hating on Candace are sitting on your butts at home, commenting behind a screen, too afraid to actually speak out in person. And Homegirl has no problem speaking to someone face to face. We saw that when she would go around with Turning Point USA and debating people face to face. She has no problem calling people out in her podcast, and she has no fear of taking on elites who refuse to release the Epstein files. So though I have my issues with Candace Owens, I'm always going to respect her for having the courage and the charisma to be able to do these things and speak out about it, though she may be a flawed person. And so, slowly trying to do better, I see her doing that. That she's speaking to priests, that she's trying to change her life. But again, whenever she's having her moments, and I noticed this with some podcasts, so there was times where she was feeling very emotional, and then she really projected that. But then the next time she'd come back on the podcast and be like, sorry guys, like I talked to my husband and I probably shouldn't have recorded the podcast that day. So I appreciate her with that honesty. That being said, guys, whatever it is that you're listening to, you have to guard your minds as much as you can. This war is not against flesh and blood, but it has everything to do with the spiritual realm. And whatever we open our minds to, we become transformed. By beholding, we become transformed. So just guard your minds, and everything that you listen to, know that there's always going to be a bias, that people, you can never remove their biases, regardless of what influencer and podcaster or as wise as they seem. They are still humans who project their own anxieties upon people. And also understanding that there's two sides of every story, that while, say, you're the influencer you're listening to may be 90% correct, there's always a 10% that we should still try to gain understanding of. Otherwise, we become narrow. We have the narrow lens, and then we'll never be able to see a perfect picture, what would be good for the overall common good of humanity. That's all I have to share with you guys. Oh, that's a lie. One more thing. I'm going to tell you guys why I will always defend Candace Owens when it comes to what happened at the Daily Wire. I had my own minor story to share. I'm going to save it for another video on the details. But I went through my own thing as well. I had a job where I gave my all, my complete all to that job. And I swear, I cried a lot of tears for that job. I was there late at night sometimes when I was a sponsor for stuff. And then I know what it's like to have people spread lies about you, and then to ultimately let you go, and then to tell others, oh, it's because of this, and X, Y reason, but then they wouldn't. Either for me, I mean, Candace, they gave her the reasons. For me, they did not give me the reasons why what happened. But I mean, being a logical and a little bit more of an intellectual, I can piece things together quite well. And I know what it's like to go through that anxiety of like starting a new job or trying to do something with your life. And then when someone criticizes you, you're like, oh, like karate style, like ready to brace yourself. But like, this is what I mean. Like sometimes we come with our own anxieties, our own PTSD from our experiences, and it's very easy to project that onto others. And sometimes I feel like influencers do that based on their experiences and like the large amounts of comments and criticisms that they get. They will project their insecurities onto people, and we just have to be careful on that, because they're going to influence us based on what they think the direction the world should head. And if you really want to avoid that, do your own research. Listen to more than just conservative podcasts. Listen to some liberal podcasts, of course, assuming that they're like not too heavy, not too far on the right, not too far on the left. Like, just guard your minds. And I'll be praying for you guys. If any of you guys feel what I felt, this craziness of like, man, this world doesn't really make sense. Like, am I the only one who feels so confused about what to listen to and what to not? Talk to me. You know, I'll see if I can create something for anybody, to like send me either messages or wants to chat. I'd rather not put my own personal information out there quite just yet. I'll create something later. And so look out for that if you're someone who likes to listen to my podcast. But if you know me, send me a message, dude. Like, honestly, like, hit me up. Like, I want to know your perspective on life. This world is crazy, and it's nice to be able to build a community to try to make sense of it all. And you're not alone in this. Take care, guys. God bless.